years where they've had special events, we've had no reason to go there and monitor it, have we? But if we approve this, we will then go, if there are special events, if the public express concerns, we would then look more closely. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of, from an enforcement perspective, it is on a complaint-driven basis. So if there is a complaint raised, by law enforcement would investigate. If we do have a site plan registered and approved for a property, and they aren't in compliance with that site plan, we do have mechanisms that we can kind of lay charges so that they do comply, or that changes are made in accordance properly with it.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just related to the same thing, Shannon, I think I heard you correctly when you suggested that if we were to approve this particular application, the property then does become subject to site plan approval relative to the uses permitted under this application in particular. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The bylaw does include a recommendation and a provision that the property be placed under site plan control.
And in fact, then that would be, albeit perhaps activities have been going on without any approvals, but that would be an improvement, so to speak, over what has been happening on the property the last while, which is what has prompted this application. Is that correct?
I would agree, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further? We already know that the applicant and the agent are in attendance. So just before I open up the floor to speakers to express their comments either in favor or in general or in opposition, the purpose of public meetings is to inform council, and I ask you to be as concise as possible in giving us your information on the position that you have. I will start by asking if there's anyone in attendance that wishes to speak in favor of the application, and as always, our procedure is to allow the applicant or agent to speak first. Mr. Arians?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I did address this in my earlier presentation, so I'm just going to give you a very quick overview. Okay. And I think, as I said, referring to this as a hotel, it's kind of a cold word. A country inn is more likely what Linny has in mind for this building. It's the wonderful adaptive reuse of a terrific heritage structure. And as Councillor Oliver indicated, zoning then triggers other municipal controls. The most predominant one is site plan control, dealing with parking, dealing with buffering, dealing with landscaping. Zoning will also allow you to issue licensing and licensing control. It'll apply health standards, it'll apply the fire code, it'll apply building code provisions. Whatever is required to bring this building and this use up to compliance starts with proper zoning, and then all the other approvals will follow. So again, it allows the adaptive reuse of a heritage resource. It provides income to the property, which is critical in order for it to maintain its current grandeur, and it sets the stage for proper controls. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, State Council?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in favor?
Since we're talking about special events specifically, I'd like to talk to that through you, Mr. Mayor and Council. The first year that I had Clamel, it was busy every night with people coming in wanting a tour. It became a tourist hub. They were constantly coming. And it made it hard for us to do the work and look after the property. So we started to say, let's have a potluck on Wednesday night. And since we're such a musical town, why don't you bring your instruments and we'll sing in the Casablanca room, which has 2 grand pianos and pipe organ. So people started to gather, and most of the people behind me attended that first year, until I started talking about the development of the Irish Village in the front lawn and how we could even bring it in for more people to share. So the second year we had music moved to Friday night, and a donation fund was started, and most of that money, as my staff can contest, went to the musicians, and still does. Because now I felt it was only fair to pay them for their time. This past summer, with the restrictions put upon me, those Friday night parties basically ceased to happen except for a couple private parties. And remember, after all of this is still my private home. I had bylaw call on me on my birthday to stop me from having a party in my living room this year, which was fine because I understood that people in my neighborhood don't like the sound of piano on the front lawn or having music coming out of my parlor windows. But I can assure you, sir, that I don't have any special events plans, and the ones that I did apply for, I was turned down. This year, I do have 2 events planned. One is the fashion show for the hospital. They've approached me to use the property inside the building for the fashion show. And the second one is the Rotary House Tour for Christmas party, and that's in the end of November. So those 2 events are planned. As for anything else, I do have music, like I said, for the guests on Friday night, and sometimes some of my friends and family show up because they love to come over and enjoy the house. And that's all I can say about that. Yes, John?
Thank you. Councillor Walls?
And to you, you are looking to have 9 rooms, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If it is approved, do you have parking for 9 rooms plus?
I have parking for 100 cars.
That's all
Where
I
do
asked.
where do you want me to put them, and where does the county want me to put them is fine with me.
My question is only, do you have parking? You have answered and said,
Yes,
yes,
sir.
you have parking. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Please come forward. If you would give us your name, and then at the end, if you would sign with your address, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
My name's Peggy Scott. I live at 3 Clonmel, which is adjacent to the property. I was away on vacation, and I only got to review the report this morning, and I didn't have an opportunity to speak with Shannon about some of the questions that I had. And I was wondering if it would be possible to get some of those questions answered now.
What I would suggest is you give us all of your questions, and then we will address those before you're seated.
Okay.
Shannon, would you like to answer them one at a time? That might be best. Okay, let's do them one at a time.
Okay.
If you have a number of them. Go ahead.
I have 4
Thank you.
questions. I did submit a letter of concern, which was included in the package. So the application is trying to legitimize the current use of the property by allowing a 9-room hotel, even though a hotel is not considered to be a neighborhood scale use. There is already 9 rooms being rented here, and also the garden shed is being rented out for guests. Is that going to be a continued use?
Through you,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor. In terms of the 9 rooms, the accommodations would have to be maintained and continued within the existing building, and would convert or recognize kind of the function that is happening now. Habitable accommodations outside of the building would not be permitted or recognized through the bylaw.
Okay, also on that, the property has accommodated a number of camper trailers and tents for weekend events. Will this still be allowed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is not something that's being entertained through the bylaw and is a separate issue in terms of enforcement.
The report indicates accessory uses to allow high teas, dinners, music nights, which are currently taking place. Does this amendment allow for the continuation of the outdoor music events with the amplified music?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of accessory space and accessory uses. It is something that would be permitted as part of the hotel use. However, the noise bylaw would apply in that circumstance in terms of excessive noise or impact on adjacent properties, but is not a zoning matter per se.
Also, the definition of a hotel in the county zoning bylaw lists accessory uses as restaurants, bars, and nightclubs, as these uses would have an additional negative impact on our neighborhood. Would this be allowed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the definition, they would be. If there is a desire to scope the extent of the uses that are permitted through the bylaw, planning staff is open to that consideration.
So currently, the events taking place are in contravention of the bylaw. And proposals to use site plan control to address some of these concerns. So who monitors the compliance with the site plan controls?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of ongoing or future compliance with the site plan, it would come down to an enforcement issue. If the use is extending or if they're not operating in conformity with the approved site plan.
So it'll be up to the neighbors to, if there's a concern, to complain to bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
So weekend events, when bylaw is not available, what do we do then?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of that, if there's significant issues in terms of concern with what's happening on the property, that would probably be a call to OPP. If there's a need or concerns to go to that extent.
And the OPP really only will come as if it's a safety issue because they do have a lot of other things to do. Oh, but just a comment. So the report says that currently you can have 3 bedrooms if you have a bed and breakfast. So my question is, if this application is approved for a hotel, will all the other bed and breakfasts in Norfolk County who want to expand the number of rooms be allowed to apply and have hotel status? Like, is this going to set a precedent for Norfolk County?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and with respect to any sort of a request or amendments that are proposed for a property, we do look at them on a case-by-case basis. So it would have to be reviewed and evaluated as such based on the property and surrounding uses and a lot of the other factors that go into when we look at it, but it is on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Now, in closing, I'd just like to say that when myself and another of the residents purchased their homes, they were aware that Clonmel was being operated under the guidelines of a bed and breakfast, and there were no issues. The neighborhood was peaceful. Since the present owner has been operating and in contravention of the bylaw, we've been subject to a number of unpleasant events which have diminished the enjoyment of our homes. I ask that council please consider leaving the zoning as a bed and breakfast and initiate steps to stop the events that are not in compliance with the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Peggy from council? Thank you, Peggy. Is there anyone else in attendance wishing to speak in opposition or general to this application? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kathy Novenka. I live at 34 Clonmel Lane, Port Dover. I went to school in Port Dover, as we know. I lived just outside of Port Dover most of my life. I moved into town in 2003. I was still working. I just retired 3 years ago from working with the Ministry of Community and Social Services for over 30 years, so that was a high-level stress job. And I was really looking forward to retirement in my nice, quiet residential home. I had 1 year of it. Then, starting last year, the events and the parties started, which, when they first started, they were held inside the castle. And that was fine. I actually attended. But when I had enough, I could go home, relax in my home. That didn't last long. Then the parties started to be taken outside onto the lawn with amplified music. I could no longer enjoy my back deck. I couldn't even enjoy sitting in my home because of the bass pounding and the amplifiers into the home. Now, it's my understanding, reading this Schedule B to the bylaws, that residential areas at any time cannot have the operation of any electronic device or group of connected electronic devices incorporating one or more loudspeakers or other electromechanical transducers and intended for the production or reproduction or amplification of sound. To me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that tells me you can't have amplified music outside in a residential area unless you have a permit or special events or something to allow that. Like Dover has Friday the 13th or bands outside. The Norfolk Hotel used to have the Brig, bands used to play outside. They had to put a roof on it. They couldn't have the music out loud open for residents. So, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, did you not say that the special events outside would be allowed, including the music?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of, wouldn't necessarily be special events in terms of the application process and licensing through that. It would be used as secondary to the hotel as a permitted use.
So are you saying she can have amplified music outside or not?
I'm not, no. In terms of amplified music, that is something that is covered through the noise bylaw. It is not addressed through the zoning.
So that is a no to amplified music outside.
Ladies, I'm sorry to interrupt. Don't be afraid to put the questions through the chair. We're not going to get into a debate between the public and staff. Kathy, if you just direct your questions through me,
Sure.
and we'll see if we can get you an answer that...
Okay, if you could get
Okay,
me an
so-
answer on that, then...
Pardon?
If you could get me an answer on that about the
Do you
amplified
want
music?
to answer that question, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the zoning, there is the potential to have outdoor events happen as secondary to the hotel. In terms of amplified music, that is not something that's covered through the zoning. It is an issue that would be addressed through the noise bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Just reading in part of this report you wrote here, you said the events that have been occurring on site to date have largely been happening in contravention to the bylaw provisions. By recognizing the use through temporary use bylaw, staff can review and evaluate the property and place subject lands under site plan control. Site plan would ensure that all parking is accommodated on site and would also require a traffic study to ensure that the road network has sufficient capacity to handle the uses. Also, the site plan would look at opportunities to buffer Clonmel Estate from adjacent residential uses to reduce the impact from vehicular movements, noise, and visual aspects of the use. I don't know if you can tell me, I'm just not quite clear on what's a buffer? I don't know what a buffer is to this. What would a buffer be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when we're looking at a site plan, it looks at the location of where a parking lot could be. So some of the buffers that can be implemented or part of that would be fences or landscape to try and mitigate some of the noise, or fencing to block lights if the vehicles are moving. So those are two types of buffers that can be implemented through a site plan.
And what's the buffer for noise?
Through you, Ms. Mayor, in terms of noise studies that could go along with it, there are noise attenuations that could be added, but we'd have to look at more specifically what types of uses or where the buffers may be needed.
Okay,
So it's kind of hard to address that specifically without having some of the details in terms of the site plan and having an idea of the greater scope of it.
my main interest here is the noise, because I do have grandchildren that visit, and the bedroom is in the front of the house, which is about 80 yards from where these bands play. And when you have a 4- and a 6-year-old that don't sleep all night, you're not having a good weekend. So that is a huge concern of mine. And it's not like they live in the area. They come and visit me for a few days when they do come, because they don't live around here. So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Any questions
Thank
for
you.
Kathy from council? Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kathy, for your comments. Specifically on the noise, have you ever personally called and complained to bylaw about the noise?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Wells?
Follow up on that and tell us what happened after she made her call?
Could you tell us what happened? It was with the follow-up with your call to bylaw about the noise? I believe that's why you called.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I didn't receive any, I didn't receive any information back from it. The noise did stop. Someone came and stopped, but I didn't, like, are you asking if I got a report back or something?
Well,
No.
I'm saying, after you called, and I think you've already answered, somebody from the bylaw department came and the noise...
Well, it was after hours, so after hours by
Well,
law.
whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So you got satisfaction?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through your deputation, I was wondering if you could tell me how long the music plays for. Is it like till 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, or?
Particular incident started at 4:30 in the afternoon, and after 4 hours, I called because I couldn't.
Right, but
My deck was like shaking.
on other nights, like what does it
On
shut
other
off
nights,
at 9, or does it go till? What time does it normally go to?
It varies.
On average?
On average, I'd say it usually quits about 10:30, 11, but other nights it's gone on longer.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
Okay, and I just want to add, when the music
may.
is,
You
I just
may.
want to add, when it's inside the house, it's
I'm
totally
sorry-
different.
I'm
When the-
sorry, I can't,
When the music is played inside the castle,
yes?
it's not loud and, the bass isn't pounding. It's when she has the outside,
Outside, okay.
the amplification outside.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much for your
You're welcome.
presentation. I will ask again, anyone that wishes to speak in opposition or general, please.
My name is Sheila Whiteley, and my husband and I live close to Clonmel on Prospect Street. You've all received correspondence from neighbors, ourselves included, in which we've expressed our concerns and our opposition to the proposed form of development for this property, including the request for temporary usage as a hotel and special event venue. You'll probably be relieved to know I'm not going to revisit all of my issues around the development at this point in time. However, the negative impacts of traffic and the parking congestion, as well as noise bylaw infractions, have been numerous and ongoing, as documented by ourselves and many of the neighbors affected. As recently as 2 weekends ago, the noise was so intense that we could hear it inside our house, downhill from the estate. Any direct, it sort of describes the challenge that the neighbors face in trying to enjoy our own undisturbed enjoyment of our property. Certainly, any direct benefit associated with permission for extended usage of this property at this point is essentially to the financial benefit of the owner, as opposed to any kind of enhancement to the use of the neighborhood. We would encourage council as well not to improve this application, specifically for the hotel and special event usage. But we believe that if the decision is taken to allow this usage, that it should be conditional on 3 issues being resolved in advance, Firstly, that the owner must provide in advance additional on-site parking commensurate with the scope of the proposed hotel and special event usage in order to mitigate the negative impact of overflow parking on Clonmel Lane and Tisdale Roads. Secondly, as the current usage appears to conform to the definition of a hotel, and I'm presuming potentially also to the definition of a restaurant under the Ontario Building Code, it would be in the interest of public safety and as an act to avoid any potential liability to Norfolk County for neglect in the event of a catastrophic event, that any temporary usage approval should be deferred until such time as the premises are fully compliant with the appropriate provincial standards. And finally, given the ongoing issues around bylaw infractions related to noise, that the owner should be prohibited from employing any outdoor bands or amplified music as a condition of continued permission to operate. We thank you for considering this input.
Thank you, Sheila. Questions? Thank you. I believe a speaker for opposition in general. If you want to start down, please. And thank you.
You're out of ink, but I'm sure that's not intentional.
Thank you. Again, my name is Joyce Wright. My husband and I have owned a residence on Clonmel since 2005, and I wish to voice my concerns regarding the intent to change the zoning of the Clonmel Castle property and the request to provide a special events permit for up to 50 people. I wish to address these 2 requests as separate entities, as they are very different. Firstly, I recognize that Ms. Steffler's desire to increase the number of rooms that she can legally rent out, especially given the size of the house that she owns. I can also understand Council looking upon this favorably, as the official plan encourages the development of hotels, motels, B&Bs, etc., to support tourism, particularly overnight stays. But by altering the zoning to R4, this also permits the property to be used as a restaurant, a bar, or a nightclub. And am I correct, Mr. Mayor, that it also could be the potential for outdoor parties?
I took that as a question.
Yeah, that's a question to you.
I thought it was. You wish to respond?
I'm sorry, Joyce,
Would you
be able to
repeat the question?
that?
Okay, what I'm saying is that do you want me to go back a bit? By altering the zoning to all R4, this also permits the property to be used as a restaurant, a bar, or a nightclub. And did I also gather that as a hotel, it could be having outdoor activities, potentially?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The zoning for this application would not be to an R4. The R4 is part of the residential component.
Okay.
So this one would just be adding a site specific to allow for the hotel. But yes, outdoor event space could be permitted as secondary to the hotel.
Outdoor event space could be secondary if it's classified as a hotel.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what's causing us problems.
Yeah, and I heard you. I just didn't realize that it was in a question form.
Okay.
So I had to.
Okay, the inherent noise issues, parking issues, and traffic issues that any of these businesses would bring with them is highly incompatible with the neighborhood and would intensify issues already identified. I would strongly encourage Ms. Steffler, along with the Norfolk County staff, to create a way. This is a unique property come up with a unique solution. That she's able to have 9 rooms to rent out legally. But let's keep in the present zoning so that we're not going to be putting local residents in peril of having a bar, a restaurant, or a nightclub opening up in our midst. And also outdoor event space. The second part of the request is that the property be issued a special events license for up to 50 people. These special events seem to be quite separate from the B&B operation. While the B&B operation would inherently appeal to people from the outside of the area and attract tourism dollars, it seems to me that the special events attract local people, not tourist dollars. With that in mind, I would encourage council to examine this part of the request with a different eye. I have voiced my concern, as I know others along Clonmel Lane have too, about noise, parking, and traffic. These issues all seem to be related to the special events, the music nights, the Christmas craft sales, the high teas. I do not wish to curtail Ms. Steffler's desire to be a special events coordinator, but I would encourage her to hold these events in locations that are appropriate and properly zoned: church halls, centers, auditoriums. These are sites that are set up with noise control, the parking control, the traffic control, and proper zoning. Our neighborhood and Ms. Stifler's property is not. I urge council to consider the points that I have made, and in so doing, deny the 2 requests that have been put forth.
Questions? Councillor Height, then Wells.
Thank you, Mayor Luca. Through you to the deputation. Ms. Wright, I see in your letter to us that you mentioned that parking is an issue, and I apologize, I don't know the street that well, but it mentions that you will take your car and you will park it on the side of the street and leave it there so that your guests can park in your laneway. How many parking spots do you have in your laneway currently?
1.
You only have 1 for your house?
Yes.
Okay, so I can see where that'd be a bit of a problem. Now, the width of the lane, is it smaller than a normal road?
I'm sorry?
Is the width of that road smaller than a normal road, like with the parking? Because there's lanes each way, and then is there not a spot for parking on one side, or is there spots on both sides of that road?
There's unrestricted parking there, so we can park on either side. And there are 3 pull-offs as well.
3?
Sort of little pull-offs at the side that allow extra parking too.
Right, so I guess where I'm having a bit of trouble with is residents there want to be able to park on the street, and there's street parking, but if you only have 1 spot, you're in a bit of a jam, and somebody else on the other side wants to park there, they can't? Is that what you're asking?
Parking there is challenging. Right.
Is it something that we could do to widen that road that would help, or is there enough, is it wide enough?
No,
No.
I don't think that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
offer.
Councillor Wells.
What is it that you would like to see there? In the past, have there been activities, forget the outdoor activities. Before that happened, were there peace and harmony in the neighborhood?
Yes, there was.
And what was happening that made the peace and harmony?
The castle was being operated as a B&B within regulations and with consideration of the neighborhood around us.
So if I understand it correctly, when it was just operating solely as a B&B, the neighborhood didn't have any problems. It's when these other activities started happening that caused the problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions? Councillor Broughton.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Luke. If we were to pass this and there was a restriction somehow on, we'll call it a special event for outdoor bands, would that be suffice? You say indoor, somebody mentioned that the indoor noise is not a problem, it's the outdoor noise,
I think that would solve the noise.
right?
I'm thinking of that, as long as the noise wasn't outside. amplified outside. I think we would still have to address the parking issue.
But did you not say that events were going on and the parking was adequate for some time? And then recently it's increased because of these, I'll call it special events.
The special events that are happening, but, you know, it was okay until the owners changed and more events started happening. When it was being used strictly as a B&B with the B&B guests, there was adequate parking and noise was fine.
So it's the special events that are the problem.
Right, and and there are a problem with the noise when the music is outside.
Right.
The noise is not as much of an issue when it's inside.
Right.
But parking, for example, with a Christmas craft sale, even though that would be an activity that would be held inside, it would still present challenges to parking.
Okay. I'll wait. I have another question for Mr. Arias. Thank you.
Any other questions, Council? I have one for you. Maybe you can assist me. It's been a long, long time since I've been in that home or the Clonmel Castle and on that property when it was a home. Do you know what that building was used for when the Clonmel Lane residence condos were built at that time? Was it still a residence or was it a B&B at that time? I don't know, and I don't know if anyone knows. I'm sure a lot of people know. I just don't. Do you know what it was?
I don't. I wasn't original owner.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in general or in opposition? Yes, sir, to this application.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name's John Van Zon. I live on the farm on Tisdale Road, 57 Tisdale. A lot of what people have said in the past, prior to me being here, noise is the big issue. I live 3,000 feet away, not 240 feet. I feel for the neighbors that have to listen to that right next door. And I'm down 2,000 feet down the driveway, and we can hear it. And the music doesn't sound like it would if you were right there, because it's amplified, it's muffled, it doesn't make sense. There's no coherence on it. If you got karaoke, it's like, I'm going to shoot the dog, right? It's terrible. So I can feel for them that they have to live beside that. I've seen the parking. I can't even take any equipment down Clonmel Lane, and I go around. But even then, I cringe when I'm taking equipment up Tisdale Road because there's no shoulder. And I hope that nobody is hugging the center because there's no dividing line on that road and it's not very wide. So that's a big issue. And I've had to stop equipment right on the road because the cars are coming too fast, so that I give them a little chance to get over onto the dirt and pass me by without hitting the equipment. There is no space on Clonmel Lane once people park there. At best, you get one vehicle that can pass through. The other person would have to find a spot and pull over if it was oncoming traffic. So what I undertake here is that she was operating in non-compliance of the B&B. So you're going to propose that she can have a hotel and event space, which is basically what she's doing now. So are we solving a problem by just changing the name? Because the issue is going to be there because it's there right now. It's the noise. And like older people can appreciate, when you want to just sit and relax out in your backyard, watch the stars, listen to the tree frogs, and then you get some banging music. That's not what we work hard and try to enjoy our lives for at the end of the day. So my question was hotel space designation, event space designation, couple that with more traffic, because that's what you're going to get. You're not going to get less, which is what we got now. We're just going to make it legal so it becomes more of an irritant to the neighborhood. It's not an area that should encompass that in that residential area, because these people are unique residents in this area. If I had a teenage kid and he was playing music like that, he'd be tuned in, right? So I don't think as a grown adult, 57 years old, I should have to sit and take it, right? So my view is that I believe council should not pass it and approve it. I think it should be denied.
Any questions for John? And thank you for your presentation. Thank you very much. I'll ask again, anyone in attendance who wish to speak in opposition or in general, you can come to the microphone now, please. Hearing none, I will ask if the agent or applicant wishes to address any of the concerns that have been brought forward by residents. Thank you, Mr. Arians.
Thank you both, Ms. Steffler, and I would like to just address
You may.
council. It's clear that the residential component is not causing concerns. I mean, whether it's 9 suites or 5 suites, I don't think that's an issue. Parking we can clearly address through the site plan process, and we'll work with staff. The accessory uses that a hotel has, I don't think is a concern. There's 9 suites. It's not, like a Hilton Garden Inn with 108 rooms or anything like that. That requires boardrooms and meeting rooms and other facilities. It's a very low-key country inn is what I keep calling this. It's clear from all the deputations that noise is the concern, noise is the issue. And the reason I walked around to sit beside Linny was to discuss with her what can we do to address that concern. And she is willing now to prohibit outdoor amplified music after 6 p.m. I think that's a legitimate compromise. If there's a wedding there on a Saturday afternoon and they have, amplified organ music or violins or what have you, I don't think anyone's going to complain. After 6 o'clock, no amplifiers. That's all turned down. We're willing to accept that as a restriction in your specific bylaw that you're considering this evening. Ms. Steffler wants to work with the neighborhood, obviously. We want to create a compatible use. That there are so many factors that are at play, the adaptive reuse, having a viable project, having a compatible project, having adequate parking, all of those factors I think will be balanced if we can address the noise issue. And we're willing to offer that as a compromise. Winnie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm really sorry for any disturbance. I know you're going to say you don't think I'm serious, but I am. This year, how many times? You can count on one hand and one was a wedding.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
You have to speak
sorry.
into the microphone.
Okay, well,
It's
I
okay.
pointed that way.
Yeah,
I
I'm
know
sorry.
that I don't know what I can do to please everyone, but I can say that I'm sorry that I've caused disturbances. This year, it was cut to the minimum, and almost all of them were inside. I don't plan on doing any outdoor. As you know, like I said earlier, I don't make any money from that. I have the music there for the guests that come on a Friday night because they call and they want to come and enjoy some music in the Casablanca room. If that pleases my neighbors and I can pull all the parking into proper places, and I'm limited to how many? 50. I think that would be fine. I can certainly compromise. The most important thing to me is my bedrooms. That's really the most important part.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm almost afraid to ask if there's anything further from council. Is there anything further? Councillor Columbus. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask the planners how they would put that into the bylaw that there'd be no noise after 6 o'clock p.m.? Yeah, I guess that's Eastern Standard Time, right? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Columbus, for the question. In terms of going forward at this point, there's kind of two avenues or two opportunities that can be explored. One being that the recommendation in the report right now is for approval. However, council can look that that approval get amended so that staff could bring a bylaw back to scope the definition of a hotel and potentially prohibit outdoor event space. Second option is that the report get deferred at this point and be brought back in December so that a bylaw can be tweaked in terms of what is permitted, and staff can investigate whether or not an opportunity to prohibit space or events happening past a certain time is something that can actually be addressed through a zoning bylaw for the property on a site-specific basis. And so that there would be an opportunity for the public as well to see the revised bylaw that is being proposed and have an opportunity to review it at that time again.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to planning. I guess those are two options now. I'm looking for option 3 where we just enforce our current noise bylaw. That covers all of county, so why aren't we just enforcing it? Do we not have a clause in there where there's no music after 11? Or what does it state?
Well, again, the bylaw and the ability to enforce it or to complain about the issue is not a planning issue. It's a separate issue, and so I believe that we can't put something into a approval of a planning application that says, I mean, I guess the way to explain it is, regardless of what the outcome is in the final use for this castle, the bylaw is the same there for noise as it is for a single-family dwelling, for a farmhouse or whatever. It's a separate issue, so I don't, Shannon, you're certainly welcome to respond to the councillor. I don't mean to cut you off at the knees. Do you wish to respond to it or not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is absolutely correct. The noise bylaw is in force and effect and does apply to residential properties, and that is a separate issue. What we can look at through the zoning application is with respect to, say, outdoor event space or the use in itself, but the noise bylaw is a separate bylaw that is already in force and effect.
That's what I'm saying. If we have a bylaw in place, why isn't it being enforced? Why would you go through extra steps to write it into a planning application? It just doesn't make sense to me, Mr. Mayor. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council? Councillor Wells? Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead then, Councillor Brown. Thank you, sorry.
I was just going to ask Shannon if she would repeat what she thought she might be able to do in terms of
The
coming
options?
back with, yes, options.
Our options, again, Councillor Walls would like you to repeat the options.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the two options would be that council could amend the recommendation that's on the floor currently for approval to include planning staff to provide a new bylaw to scope the definition of the hotel to exclude outdoor event space. The second option, which planning staff would recommend, would be a deferral at this time so that the bylaw can be drafted, a report then brought forward back in December with a new recommendation outlining what has been proposed, what has been changed, and what the new bylaw would say.
Continue.
Thank you very much. With that in mind, if you would prepare option number 2, put it in writing, and so that we could, and I will move that when you have it ready, please.
Now, I can't take a motion in a public meeting.
No, I understand that, Mr.
Okay. I'm sorry. My apologies. Councillor Brunton, I apologize to you. I didn't recognize you. I did, and then I didn't. I'm sorry.
I heard Mr. Arian say he could address the parking, but this is a 3-year trial, am I correct?
That's correct.
And I'm looking at this noise issue, and irregardless of what we do, this group of people, to me, are a lot maybe younger than the ones that are possibly, and I say possibly, going to go in these stacked townhouses. I would think they would have a lot of complaints with noise, that type of residence. But having said that, I kind of agree with Councillor Height. If we have a noise bylaw, let's deal with it.
You're asking a question, right?
Well, I wanted to make sure we have a 3-year trial period.
Okay.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and you did ask a question, and then you went on. Okay. Any more questions from staff? From council to staff. Councillor Wells.
Mayor, do you suppose there's a possibility we could ask Mr. Aaron to come back and what he thinks about the proposed suggestion? Is that possible?
Well, I think so. I'm just asking the clerk. I want to make sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd suggest that we don't encourage a back and forth or negotiation with him, but if he desires to come up and propose a solution.
Can I would like to have a show of hands to have Mr. Aarons come back if he has something for a possible solution here. Those in favor of that? Yes, please. Yeah, if I do it and they don't want me to, then they shoot me down.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor. So you have a zoning application in front of you, and we have a zoning bylaw. So you're absolutely correct. Noise is noise is noise, and that's dealt with through another venue. You are adding a permission as a temporary use to allow a hotel. All you simply need to say is a hotel excluding outdoor events with amplified music after 6 p.m. So it's right in the permissions for the hotel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes. Go ahead.
Just to advise council, that wording as proposed could still be problematic because I believe the noise bylaw has an all-around exclusion from noises. So you'd be granting, there is a normal process for seeking approvals or exemptions to the sign, to the noise bylaw, which is to go through the bylaw appeals committee. And if council were to grant something carte blanche, they'd be going outside of that regular process. And that process also includes a circulation radius of the property for every single event. So we'd be just basically saying that we aren't going to notify people of events going on at this property that end prior to 6 p.m.
I'm going to ask you a question, Shannon, if I may, and you'll be able to answer this, but I don't want to ask it in any way, shape, or form because there is no motion. We're still in a public meeting to influence any of these elected people. Is there an advantage to defer this to try to hammer out something here that these neighbors can know before council votes on it down the road, that it's something that they can live with? Pam, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a very good question. Planning staff would recommend the deferral option. Shannon outlined too. The deferral option allows the residents in the room to have the opportunity to comment on the scope definition of the hotel. It would be planning staff's opinion that that should be to exclude outdoor events and activities. We're a little cautious on the use of the 6 o'clock timing. Legally, we're not sure that that is something that we would provide support for in the zoning bylaw document. It would also give us opportunity to look at that avenue.
Thank you. Any other questions to staff? I would like a motion to close this public meeting. Councillor Height and Councillor Sonnenberg move seconded. Those in favor? This public meeting is closed. Now, on page 263, I'm sorry, that's not correct. Page 271 is the staff recommendation. I am looking for direction. Councillor Black.
I would move deferral, and so staff can have a look at this and try and figure out the noise aspect of it.
You're asking for deferral? So a seconder, Councillor Wells. In the meantime, Councillor Oliver. Just let me just give me 1 second, then I'll entertain you. Thank you. Just so you're clear, Black has moved, Wells has seconded that the application of Lenny Steffler be deferred to staff for a further report to address outdoor events and noise and bring a further report forward. Councillor Oliver, to the motion now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly do not support deferral at this point. We've just sat through almost 3 hours of discussion on this property and this development. It's all come down to one small issue, and that is amplified music outside after a certain time that disturbs the neighbors. And the applicants have suggested a way out of that, which quite frankly, I had in my mind as well. I'd remind my council colleagues that this is a temporary use thing. We've put all of these people through this. We can deal with it tonight and make us and reach a conclusion. So I don't really see what advantage there is at all to a deferral. So I'm sorry, but I can't support deferral.
No apology needed. Councillor Brunton, to the motion, to the deferred motion.
And I apologize, Your Worship, but I thought parking was also an issue. Should that not be added to that? Well, noise was the main issue addressed in Councillor Black's motion. I'm saying the applicants requested parking as an issue. Mr. Arians said he could address it, so let's...
Okay, to planning, the question from Councillor Brunton is the parking. Would that be addressed in the site plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, parking requirements would need to be satisfied. There's been no request to reduce the number of parking spaces that would be required for the use, and that would be evaluated through the site plan application.
Thank you.
It doesn't really have to be in here, but Black and Wells is your motion. If you wish to put it in here, we'll add it. Just
The reason I didn't put it in because I knew it was going to be site plan and it'll be dealt with under site plan.
It's up to you two, not me. Go ahead. Any other speaking to the motion? Councillor Sonnenberg.
Councillor Oliver is absolutely correct. We have a major problem here. We've been talking about it all night. It's been addressed. It's been solved. What's another 3-month study and report going to do? The proponents have offered a solution. Let's let them get on with it. Thank you.
Further discussion to the motion? Yes.
Mayor, I thought deferral took precedence over other motions.
We're speaking to the motion to defer this for a further staff report. So I'm not sure what your comment. help me out here.
We're on the deferral, so.
We're on the deferral, you're okay with it? I haven't done anything wrong? Everybody agrees that I haven't done anything wrong? Not fired yet? Okay. Any other discussion? I'll call